We've all sat in the doctor's office. It is cold, and there is the crinkle of the paper, and you wait. You wait and you wait and you wait, because doc is never on time. And sometimes they come in and it's quick. Hey, your physical was just fine. Come back and see me next year. But other times they walk in and they say, sit down. We need to have a talk. And you see, I have been present at the moment of injury for other service members. The exact moment that would end up ending their military career. And that was because I served as a medic. But during my time in Afghanistan, I witnessed and treated dozens of traumatic brain injuries. And then after a vehicle rollover, I experienced one myself, which led to a year of in and out of the hospital and seeing neurologists and neurosurgeons. And I found myself sitting in that doctor's office waiting, only to be told that I would be medically retired for a head and spinal injury. You see, I loved the Army. I really did. I wanted to make it a career, but life changed, and I was told, go find a new life trajectory. Okay, I was 22. I came from a blue-collar family. I'm now dealing with seizures and headaches and impulse issues. So new life trajectory, what does that actually mean? So after a series of failed jobs, I decided I will try school. And that was a big deal for me because not only was I about to become a first-generation college student, but the reality is I didn't join the Army because I came from a lineage of service members. I didn't have this innate calling to serve. I was 17, and I was more afraid of a college classroom than I was of an active war zone. And joke's on me, because I have been in college for the last 10 years. But nevertheless, I went, still scared, and now with this laundry list of neurological deficits. But with some help from my professors, it turns out I wouldn't do so bad. But I remember sitting in one of my classes, and we were talking about Santiago Cajal. He is the modern-day godfather of neuroscience, who in 1928 said, in the adult centers, the neuropaths are something fixed, ended, immutable. He said, everything will die, and nothing may be regenerated. And I was shook. I immediately was brought back to that doctor's office, and I remember being told that there are medications and therapies to help me manage the symptoms of my TBI, but I'm always going to experience these issues. Fortunately, there's a second half to Cajal's quote, and it's what brings me here today. For he next said, but it is for the science of the future to change, if possible, this harsh decree. When I was sitting in that class, I was a pre-med student. I was doing well in all the right classes. I did research, internships, volunteered, and I would have made a great physician. But I remembered feeling helpless. I remember being told, I'm sorry, there's just not much more that we can do. And I realized that I was more interested in developing new therapies than I was in prescribing the current ones. And so that is what I am hoping to do. So I pursued my PhD at the University of Notre Dame with a focus on neuroscience and regenerative medicine. But when we're talking about creating new therapies, what we're actually talking about is biomedical research. Now, most TBI research is conducted in rodents, rats, mice, and they're great models. But they're expensive, they're time-consuming, and they do not have the ability to regenerate, which limits us to investigate only the injury itself. Whereas I work in adult zebrafish, this tiny little fish, but their brain is very similar to us in structure and function, but most importantly, they are extremely regenerative. From the moment they're born until the very end, they can regrow their eyes, their heart, their brain. Almost everything can regenerate. Using them, I've developed a novel brain injury model, using the most common mechanism of injury found in humans, and that's just a good old-fashioned bump on the head, where just like people, my zebrafish experience consequences, things like seizures and brain bleeds, learning and memory issues. So we too can investigate the injury as well as the recovery as they start to regenerate a few days later. And that is what you see here. Those white dots on the right are injury-induced adult stem cells. This is a regenerating zebrafish brain after a traumatic brain injury. Now, one of my goals was to get a better understanding of the gene regulation that leads to this regeneration. To put simply, you can think of genes as a series of light switches where some are turned on and off across your entire life. What I want to know is, in the zebrafish, which ones are turned on and off and when, that allows them to replace lost and damaged brain tissue. Through this, we've identified one of these genetic pathways that when we turn it on before the injury, it's like the injury never happened, making it a potential therapeutic for at-risk populations like service members that we know are deploying and going outside the wire. And this is exciting, it really is. But it's still preclinical, it's still in animals, and likely decades away from being utilized in human populations. Furthermore, while blunt force trauma, that good old-fashioned bump in the head, is the most common globally, for our military community, it is blast injuries. Wanting to continue my service out of uniform and return back to my military community, as a postdoctoral fellow, I will be investigating repeated blast exposures and their association with clinical and physiological response, as it might relate to active duty service members, veterans, also athletics. My goal here will be to advance biological tools to identify injury, track symptom risk, and continue to identify potential therapeutic targets. I want to leave you with this today. The saying is, courage is not the absence of fear, but the willingness to do it anyway. That is a lot easier when you have help. I have gone from patient to PhD to researcher because I've had so much help. So what I ask of you today is to think about what barriers you might experience, whether they're internal or external, and what are you doing to ensure that those that come after you are not facing the same thing. Thank you.